While our last minute attendees join, I would like to just run through a few housekeeping points to ensure we have a pleasant experience in today's webinar. As much as we would like to see everyone's beautiful faces, we would like you to keep your cameras off to preserve the call quality. Our host and our author panel will switch on their cameras for the discussion and the Q&A session. Please, can you also stay on mute unless you are addressing the session? There will be a time for you to ask the panel questions, but you can also post your questions in the chat if you'd prefer. And lastly, please note that the session will be recorded and circulated after the event. So just to give a quick run through of the agenda, we've got a jam-packed one for today. I'm first going to do a quick introduction of the company and who we are and where we've come from. I'm then also going to introduce our panel. We're then going to jump into an overview of the title and highlight some of its key features. We're excited to have some of our authors who will be sharing with us today what makes the new edition exceptional, and then we're going to open the floor for a Q&A session and invite you to participate. We'll then close off with an explanation of how to access the book and who to contact. So just a quick overview of who we are. We are now Maskew Miller Learning. And for anyone in the higher ed space, you may have known us as Pearson South Africa previously. However, in 2022, Pearson South Africa sold their shares to a business called Novus Holdings. So while we have a new name, a new look and new feel, we still provide high quality learning products and services that are meaningful to the local industry and also make a real difference in the lives of our students. Our purpose is to enable learners to move forward by providing trusted, quality educational resources and materials for a brighter future through learning. I'm going to quickly play a short video. So a quick introduction to the panel from Maskew Miller. My name is Janet Nodia. I am the product manager for the Higher Ed and TVET portfolio. And joining me are Zami Klati and Michelle Majoko, our key account managers. Then I'm very privileged to introduce our key speakers for today. We have Professor Amanda Barrett, who is an associate professor in the Department of Private Law at the University of Cape Town and has been teaching family law for approximately 15 years. She's been the lead editor on the title since its first edition. She's also responsible for updating the family law portion of the World's Principles of South African Law. Joining her is Professor Wessel Domingo. She is the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Johannesburg. She was the previous head of School of Law at the University of the Witwatersrand. She holds a master's degree from Columbia University and a Doctor of Jurisdictional Sciences degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's also an accredited family law mediator and does family law mediation training for NGOs. We're going to take a quick look at the author panel. There are 5 contributing authors on the title, and they represent 4 different higher education institutions. They're not only academics, but also esteemed members of the law community and consult, mediate, and train. The diversity of authors' backgrounds plays an important role in ensuring that the content in the book is framed from different perspectives and positioned within a variety of contexts. Just before I hand over to Michelle to take us through the specific book's key features, I'm just going to run through a couple of the hallmark series features that this title belongs to. It's part of our well-known Fresh Perspective series, which has been created with our South African students in mind. They are written by local authors who use examples and explanations that both students and lecturers can relate to. The style of language is accessible and easy to follow, taking into consideration that many of our students are not native English speakers. Design features like tables, pictures, breakout text boxes chunk the theory into manageable sections and make the textbooks much less daunting. They're also priced to be affordable, which is essential in these economically challenging times. I'm now going to hand over Michelle.
Good morning, all. Thank you so much, Janet, for the great introduction. As I've already been introduced by Janet, my name is Michelle Majoko, and I'm a Key Account Manager for Maskimela Learning. I will just be going into the key features of this title and just looking at some of the great features that it also has to offer. So looking at the Law of Persons and Family Perspectives, third edition, it offers a comprehensive introduction both to the South African Law of Persons as well as to the South African family law. The content is introduced in real life case studies and taught and explained explicitly, and we will see this during the author panel. The pedagogy approach teaches skills such as reading cases for rules and principles to solve practical, everyday legal problems and working with these rules and principles to build a convincing legal argument. The updates to legislation and recent case law are also in this title, and there are numerous practical exercises as well as solutions for both the students as well as the lecturers. There's an extensive reference to key legislations as well as cases. Now we're going to look at specific key features in which each chapter actually begins with. The textbook includes many rich features that expand the key themes of the disciplines. These elements include the following. They include real-world scenarios and give examples of tangible scenarios that are relevant to the chapter, which assists the students to start contextualizing and framing of the context in a relatable way from the start. The What Do You Think section increases the engagement by posing questions to the students that they will try to answer using the rules of law. The Aperture feature is used for additional information as well as discussion. Many of the Aperture originate from the questions asked by the students during lectures. The answers are not core to are not core to lectures, but the students will find them interesting as well as useful. And in each chapter, again, just a continuation of what it is that you'll find. The student needs to choose the correct option, as well as open-ended questions where the student must formulate their own answers using the understanding of the legal principles that they've been reading about. It encourages the student to also start to think as like a lawyer. So it allows for them to actually put themselves in the position of a lawyer and think like one as well. The important legal terminology is explained, and it helps students develop their subject-specific vocabulary. Some of the additional key features are that the key rules are highlighted throughout to act as a base for the student to start forming sound arguments using these rules and legal principles logically. It is also a summary of the fundamental law of a section. The key legislation features. In an expansion of the key rule feature, this shows the key piece of legislation that is relevant to a case study. These sections, or rather, let's just say sections, are also explained to further aid the students' understanding even a little bit more. At the end of the chapter, these are some of the features that you can look forward to. The review your understanding questions, which are developed for the classroom context and has been used and tested with students ahead of the publications, are questions the students must answer based on the facts that they have gained throughout the chapter and the content in there. The further reading section provides additional sources that the students can use to explore the subject even further. The book also includes a full bibliography for those who want to read beyond and want to do that extra further reading on their own. And the last of our set of features are lecturer support material. We know how important these are to lecturers, but and we know that these are resources that they love to utilize in order to make their lives a little easier. So the PowerPoint slides are there, and they save the lecturer time and support in different teaching styles. They're easy to incorporate in the class, and they're specifically developed for this edition and provide valuable teaching tool as they have a visual summary of every chapter in the book that you as a lecturer can utilize. I will be handing over to Janet, and we will then also just begin with the author discussion.
Thanks very much, Michelle, for that overview. And this is the section of the webinar where we're now going to have the author discussion and the audience engagement. So just a reminder, just to conserve the bandwidth, please only the speakers should activate their cameras during this discussion. Please reserve all your questions to the end. If you would like to come once we open from the floor question section, please, if you could use the raise your hand feature if you've got a question, and then Karen will advise when you should come off mute. However, if you would prefer, you may type your questions into the chat box and Karen will pose them to the authors on your behalf. I'm now going to hand over to Zimi and to Amanda and to Wissal. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Janet. A warm welcome to our authors, and thank you so much for making time to join us for this webinar. It's always great to have the authors and having lecturers being able to interact with the authors of the book. Without wasting any time, maybe let me just kick off with you, Amanda. What makes this textbook stand out from other similar titles in the market?
Hello, Zimi, and everybody else. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about my baby. There it is. This is what we produced in the first edition. And now, in the new edition, we have this joyful child on the cover, which I very much appreciate. So what makes this different is when you open this book, you see text that is, can you see it? Like arranged in accessible design. I was so delighted when I saw the design features of this book. So what we want, because a lot of our students are coming out of high school, we want a book that they will look at and feel, I can cope with this. This is something that I want to do. And from my point of view, this baby of mine was a complete labor of love. It was a response to my actual students in the classroom at that time. What do they need? So this was their prescribed textbook, Villa, Law of Persons and Family, which looks like this. And I don't know if you can see this well, but it's just text from beginning to end, a whole long book, hundreds of pages of text that looks like that. So they would look at this and feel overwhelmed. And then there's this book that I personally love, Boberg, Law of Persons and Family. What we wanted the students to know was the information in these books, so they had a robust and comprehensive and useful understanding of South African law. This is what we want them to know. But we disguise it like this. So even though the content of this book is robust, we want to encourage thorough and precise and exact kind of legal reasoning in our students. We want them to have all the tools they will need for their whole law degree and for legal practice. We also want to encourage critical thinking because we didn't want to put it in context. We want to do all of that, but we do not want to terrify the students. So what this book does as a labor of love for my actual students, and then by extension to all students, is introduce them in a welcoming way to say, yes, you can do this. And also this is something you would love to do. So that is the main feature of this book, is for a student to look at this and say, yes, I want to do this, and yes, I can. And then guide them through it in a very accessible, welcoming, happy and fun way. I think that is what we do. And I'm very happy. The book has been so well received by every student that I have taught. And I get messages from students I don't even know from all over the country telling me how much they love the book. So
yeah.
Okay,
And
so
maybe
thank you.
Wissal, would you like to add anything there?
Yes, I do. I do know it's a labor of love, and it's a shared labor of love, I want to say. What I love about the book, and it has gone, the previous one was very thick as well, Amanda, if you remember the original one that you gave. I think with the bigger design and it being longer, it's less overwhelming as well. But one of the things that stands out about the book is how it's structured inside. So when earlier on, when you were showing the breakout blocks, and it was color coded. And I think what we also want to do with this book is that you get visual learners. And so as you work through the book, students also pick up very quickly. The blue text is the legislation, using the law as the orange part. And so in an exam process, the book then visually, they're able to recall things from the book. And reading becomes fun. It's not the same text throughout the book. We've also included cartoons and all sorts of exciting little things that also sparks the love for learning. So that's a big thing. One thing about the book, it's a 2-in-1 book as well. So there's the law of persons and family law packaged in one book, and that is something different as well. Thanks.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And talking about that, the 2-in-1, can you probably provide more details about how there is a strong vein of accessibility that is brought into the design of the book? Maybe you can both take it, Amanda and Roselle.
I think Janet did point out some other features earlier, just and Michelle, just that this is what we like to do in the classroom, is involve the students from the beginning of a section by asking them some questions. Imagine if you knew this person. I mean, the people that we make up, they sometimes sound over the top, but these scenarios are not just, they are invented by us and the people are invented by us, but the actual things that happen to the people in the stories are real things. So we want to engage the students to imagine this is your friend and this has happened, what would happen next? So they get quite engaged. And then you want to discuss with them, how will you resolve this problem using the law? So that is actually the way that the book proceeds. So we engage them from the beginning with a story that intrigues and interests and sometimes amuses them, sometimes shocks them, to say, okay, and this is your friend, what are you going to do now? How will the law help this? And sometimes the way the law helps this is not the way that you might think about it sort of socially or emotionally. The law is very precise and exact and structured and disciplined. So we want to teach them how to use the law to solve these kinds of absurd, sometimes it seems absurd situations, but these sometimes the most like unbelievable things are based on actual cases. So you say, well, this actually did happen to someone. Here's the case. Do you want to read what happened to these real life people?
Roselle?
Yes, so something, and Amanda touched on, so what you'd notice with each of the chapters, there is a scenario. And so it was very important that when we teach, we place the students in the context of their own lives as well. And we set some of the scenarios in particular areas in South Africa. We used, so many of the other textbooks is very much, I want to say, Janet and John and Mary. We used local names. We used local people. So there was a movement for decolonization of education as well. And we brought that into the book to contextualize. And so students don't say, and this is someone else's life. This is something that they can identify with. And that was important. One of the strong features of the book is that the scenarios is not just something that we spoke about in the beginning. If you start working through a chapter, that scenario that we based in the beginning runs through all the explanations that we do. So we could be at a particular section and we'll say, remember the scenario that we did at the beginning, and that's written into the textbook. In certain of the chapters, which you don't often find in these kinds of textbooks. Yeah. We also allow them the opportunity to engage. So part of that critical thinking is, and that is what we have, what do you think? Which is important for our students to have a voice and agency in class. And then we say, well, this is what the law says. And then they make that and they say, oh, well, we were a little bit off, and that's important. And then we go into the law. A good feature of this, and this is something students always ask is, and this is why we put the review your understanding. At the end of it, they always like, do I actually know what I've just done? And in an exam situation, students panic. So the Review Your Understanding it's a guide, it's a help to prepare for that exam as well. Because there's many of them that's saying, okay, so we've done all of this, but do I really know what it is? And we've also got further reading for the student that wants to go a little bit more into, and you always get that one or two, Amanda, that wants to do a little bit more. So that's also within the textbook. We also have an ebook. The ebook version of it. So there is also the availability for students that may not want to carry the textbook, but many of our students now want to do digital learning. So that's also available in the book. And so you have the choice, the hard copy or the digital version as well.
Yes. You both touch on very important aspects of the features. And I think Michelle will also touch on the accessibility of the book. But can you both tell us a bit about what content and updates were added to this 3rd edition?
So Mandy, do you want me to? Okay, go ahead.
I mean, we were writing this edition with you know, the due date of when it had to be finished to go to the printer. But the law was galloping ahead at the same time. So while we were busy trying to complete the book so it could be, you know, copy edited and typeset and all of that, the law was still busy changing. So we had to constantly update it to wanted the most up-to-date version of the law at the time of publication. And important, very important, crucial cases were decided during that period, like the Boanya case about life partners is one example. And the other case is Grayling, which is published as G, which was heard in Johannesburg, but is now before the ConCourt. Now that will make very fundamental changes to the law of divorce. So those are the sorts of things we were running around trying to keep up with, knowing that we wanted the most up-to-date version of the law at the time of publication. So we got the G case from the High Court into the book, but we didn't know at the time of sending this off to be printed what would happen in the ConCourt. Now we can guess what would probably happen in the ConCourt, but with the ConCourt you can often be wrong. When you've got a vague idea of what you think they will do. So what to do? We don't want to send out a book that is immediately going to be out of date because the Constitutional Court has now ruled on an extremely important part of the Divorce Act. So what we did do is say to the students, this is before the ConCourt. What did they do? And it also empowers the students now to know what to do in this situation. It's before the court. What did the court say? So then they have to learn how to go and look in the ConCourt website and see, you know, when is this case, has this case been decided, how to find the new judgment. And then we have provided them with the skills to say, okay, well, these are the things, these are the issues that the Constitutional Court had to rule on. And what did the Constitutional Court say? So we couldn't tell them the answer because we can guess at the likely answer, but we don't know the answer. But to get the students to give them the skills to assess what the Constitutional Court is going to say without, you know, trying to guess what the Constitutional Court will actually say. So the book in that way will remain up to date in the sense that we haven't committed ourselves to the Constitutional Court judgment, but we've given the students the skill to find that judgment and understand it and understand its importance. So that's one of the things that we were running around trying to make sure it was up to date. And I think we did most of it, except for this one obvious example that we couldn't do. And Boanya also is the ConCourt has decided, but it's still having ongoing effects. Family law is a fast-moving thing. The student said to me, do we need to buy the new edition? Can't we just use an old one, secondhand? And I said, well, this time round, actually, I think you do need to invest in the new edition because there have been a lot of changes in the last 3 years.
Wasal, would you like to add anything?
Just to add to that, yes, absolutely. I think I want to say lucky, Amanda, to have these cases going to the ConCourt. One of the other changes, I think there was a legislation, it was case law as well, but one of the things that we also changed that students will pick up from the other day, we changed some of the scenarios as well. And so a lot of the scenarios have been changed. The first and the second edition had the same scenarios. So they'll find in the third edition different scenarios. And the Review Your Understanding, we changed a lot of the questions. So it's not the same ones that we used before. So those were some of the updates as well.
I'm actually glad to hear that there aren't just like updates, but there actually there's new content that has actually been added. And Amanda, why did you find it important to provide background to the students of the socio-economic context of the family?
You cannot possibly understand family law without situating it in a context. Because it does deal with the most personal parts of your life, but the state still regulates those most personal parts of your life. And I think it's important for the state to do it. And one of the things that I have been teaching about for a long time, before I started teaching this course, is the gendered nature of the economy and the gendered nature of society. So for me, that's a big thing. So we have a constitution which requires substantive equality and forbids unfair discrimination on the basis of sex and gender. And yet, even though the constitution says that, real life as experienced by real people is highly, highly gendered. So to understand the interventions that the law can make under those conditions, you need to understand what it is like to be a woman in South Africa in this particular context. And obviously not all women are similarly placed. So you have to think a bit about how does this affect women if they are poor? So the majority of women in this country are in that situation. So we just have to think, how can the law intervene to protect the constitutional rights of people in that context? So, I mean, that is part of what we want to do. I insist on it, that the law must, in fact, respond to the lived realities that people, the obstacles and challenges that they face. So the Constitutional Court has been very sympathetic and very understanding. So it's up to the students now to read what the Constitutional Court has said about what can say it's a cliche, but the lived reality of real people in South Africa. I don't think you can understand family law without understanding that context and understanding why it is imperative for the Constitutional Court to intervene in the ways that it has. Bwanya is a good recent example. And I believe that the G case currently before the Constitutional Court will also be situated in that context.
I think that is actually a very important, a very important part. Yeah. Before we open the floor to our delegates to be able to ask questions, just one last question. Can you explain how this publication will support and enlighten the lecturers' teaching delivery for law of persons and family?
Michelle, do you want to take this one?
Yes, I will. So when we did this book, and I think maybe we should start from there. Amanda was my external examiner for my family, for family law and persons. And I have to say, she was one of those, with all due respect to all my other colleagues, she really engaged and looked at how students answered. And we used to chat about our students and how they acquiring knowledge and how we teach. And that was the brainchild, Amanda, of this book. But what it was that it wasn't only a book for the students, but it was also a book for us in terms of the way in which we teach. And we wanted a book to be able to reflect how we do that in class. So there's not a disconnect between the teaching and the learning. And the way in which we teach is guided by the book. So we start off with the scenarios we give it, then we go into what do you think? But the scenario could also be supplemented by what is happening in the news. I also want to say that. So there could be a story that was happening. I remember there was the Gwyneth Paltrow issue of unconscious uncoupling at the time. That was her divorce. And so bringing that in. And then working through the book. The book is very helpful also because it does provide you with using the law. There are little exercises in there. A lecturer could use the review your understanding section and bring that in. There's the PowerPoint slides now that also accompanies this. So there are many tools to assist a lecturer, particularly I think someone that's just also starting to teach family law for the first time. I would say it's very user friendly. And also part of this is a lot of times when you teach, the textbook is it's almost away and you teach, but with this, what I mean by that, students don't bring the textbooks to class. With this, you can work with the textbook, with the student in class and teach. And so that's the dynamic part of the textbook as well. Amanda, I don't know if there's anything else you'd wish.
Well, I think, it's true that Wissel and I worked on this book on the first edition to imagine what it could be. So I learned a lot from Wissel, and just about engaging with students and what have you in the book as opposed to just in the classroom. So I don't know, but Wissel, my experience was a really hard textbook that the students must deal with this. So they really needed me to help them guide them through this very difficult, inaccessible text. So what Wissel and I were doing was to try to, the things that we were actually doing, to take the hard, inaccessible text and bring it to life and make it manageable for our actual students, was to put it in a book that did that kind of thing. So I would say that for other people teaching the course, our book is easier to work with in terms of teaching your course than, say, Boberg or Villa or even Heaton. So because our book is, it's like what Wissel and I do in our classroom and the other authors. So if they want to, we can provide some assistance, I suppose, for a new lecturer who wants to know what to do next, because it's very bewildering to come into lecturing and you've got Villa and Boberg and you think, how can I make this accessible to my students? With our book, I think now becomes, Wissel and I know, this is how you make it accessible and fun for your students. So it's,
Well,
I think
yes, Amanda, you can go.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Amanda. So this is the portion of the Q&A where we're going to open it up to anyone who's on the call. So if you do have any questions that you would like to pose to Wissel and Amanda, please pop them into the chat or feel free to raise your hand and Karen will direct you. Do we have any questions?
I don't
Well,
see any in the chat box or no hands raised.
While we are waiting, I actually do have a question for the authors. Wissel and Amanda, if you can maybe just allude to some of the features of how the book is structured in terms of giving students real skills that are going to help them in the workplace, sort of real employability and 21st century skills, and if you can just highlight some of those.
So what the book does, if you look at the beginning, we start off with simple things like find the legislation, find the Constitution, find a section in the Children's Act. And what you would notice is there's a scaffolding of skills. And so it's the easy things, go and find something, and you can find it in the library, you can find it online. And then once you've found it, you now need to read the case or the legislation. And so it's going into another skill set, which is reading. And then further on, you'll see we scaffold the skills in terms of, we're now going to give you a problem type question or scenario where you're going to have to apply what you found and what you read to a certain. So what we've tried to do is to scaffold the skills, but also most importantly to have transfer of that skill knowledge. What we've noticed with our students, particularly, you have to remember that Family Law and Persons is a first year course. And so students are doing introduction to law and they're doing all sorts of things. And what we're doing in this course is we're reminding them and reinforcing that skill set in here. And that's done in the book. And so as you work through the book, what you're getting is how to conduct research, how to analyze and critically evaluate material, the ability to communicate, because what do you think part of it is an engagement with the students. And there's written exercises which they have to do. So it's the operation of those legal skills, and there's the retrieval of the information in terms of review your understanding. And all of these skill sets are the outcomes of an LLB degree. So it was very important for us to scaffold those skills and then also to have the transfer of the skills. And so that's what we tried to do within the book.
Excellent. Amanda, I don't know if you want to make any other comments as well.
It's okay, finding a case, finding a piece of legislation, reading it, understanding what's important about that particular piece of legislation or judgment are important legal skills that you need to learn. That's what you do. That's why you go to law school. So that's built into the book. Here's the piece of legislation. What does it actually mean? How do you understand what it means? And do you understand what it does in practice? And then the other thing is learning to answer the law question, like identifying the issues, the rules that you need to resolve it, applying those rules to the facts that you've got, and reaching a conclusion and developing a strong legal argument. So those are crucial skills for lawyers, and that is something that the book is intended to help students develop those particular skills. So I mean, that is what we want to do in our courses. And this is the book we use to help us and to help students to learn those skills.
I just want to add, sorry, Janet, I just want to add to what Amanda is saying there, because I think Amanda spoke about the socioeconomic context as well. And you spoke about what are the real skills we're giving students. And I think that is very, very important within this book, because when students go out to practice, it's not law in isolation anymore. It's not an abstract thing. They have to take into account the socioeconomic context of their clients and where they're working in. So all those, I want to say those other things we've included in that. And that is why that socioeconomic context was important within the book as well.
That's excellent. And just to say that I think, that's like, really considering, where we are, in the current times, and knowing that there's just so much information available, where do you find things? And also this need of how are you empathetic with people in terms of their context and what they're going through. So I think those are all fundamental, and knowing that teaching critical thinking and reasoning, and but at the same time, those one wants to call them soft skills, but I was at a conference this week where someone referred to them as essential skills, going forward, is just really, it's really fantastic. And if they can be, embedded in someone's, kind of academic career right from the start, they will just go on to be so much more employable by the time that their degrees are finished, and it will become second nature to them, hopefully, by the time that they leave universities. So that's really fantastic. Do we have any other questions from the floor at the moment? I have seen some nice comments from comments coming through on the chats.
Yes, so the comment is, thank you for the update. The book remains user-friendly, pitched perfectly for NQF5 students, and the students become mindful of social contexts in which they will operate. So thank you, Amanda Kinners, for that comment. Don't know if there's any other questions.
No, but I think
maybe I can ask.
Yes,
maybe I can ask one question. Seeing Amanda's comment. Would you say this book is like she's saying it's pitched perfectly for our NQF5 students? Would you say that it's at that level, or can it also be used at other levels as well?
It's a book for new law students, for people that haven't studied law before. So it's pitched at a level where a student can come out of high school and start law. And that's quite a big jump from high school to university. So we want to help them. But that doesn't mean that it's only useful for students at that level. A lot of my students are postgraduate students. They already have a degree. Some of them have honors degrees, master's degrees. Some of them even have PhDs. So this book is not a high school textbook. This is a book that with a lot of depth. So even though the information is presented in a way that is very accessible, it's actually not an easy book. It's not a high school textbook. It is in fact quite sophisticated and the students might not recognize it at first because we want it to look like this, like a friendly book that you can start when you're still 17 or 18. But older students actually realize that there are sophisticated elements in the book. Some of the critical reasoning some of the critical questions we are asking are not, they are interesting also to other people. And the other thing about the book, it's robust. We mentioned a lot of cases. It's completely up to date. It's got a lot of footnotes. It's a proper legal textbook. So it can be used by practitioners, and actually is, I know, to explain the law. So and to be an up-to-date source of law. So I think it's not merely for first-year students. It's also very usable and robust for other sorts of people, older students or even people in practice.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. I'm not sure if there are any more questions or comments.
No more.
Fantastic. Then I think if we're going to just jump into the kind of concluding section. So I'm going to start our presentation then, and I am going to hand back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Janet. So we'll be looking at the textbook accessibility and how it is that you would be able to access the textbook if you were to prescribe it. We do have a print publication as well as the ebook solution. For the print publication, once you've prescribed the book, you would let your key account manager know, and we would be in contact with the bookstores around you in order for them to be able to order it and to ensure that your students also have accessibility to it when they need it. And then when we are looking at our ebook solution, there are a number of features that come standard with the ebook solution. So you could be looking at highlighting, creating notes, which are easily accessible, and as well as the ability to be able to search for keywords. Looking at the exciting upcoming law titles that we do have from Muscular Learning coming in 2024, we're looking forward to Introduction into SA Law Fresh Perspective, which would be the 3rd edition. And we're also looking at welcoming the Labor Law in Context, which would be the 2nd edition. All of these titles will be coming in 2024. So just to summarize everything that we have discussed in the session, everything that has been touched on during the session. So we're looking at the text being presented in an interesting and visually appealing design, making it less daunting for students, which we know is something that is essential. Want to ensure that the students want to engage with the material and the content at all times. The content is introduced in real-life case studies and taught and explained explicitly. We've seen this during the author discussions, where we looked at some of the cases that were actually applicable in real life that the students can actually refer to and relate to by means of research. The pedagogical approach teaches skills such as reading cases for rules and principles, using the rules and principles to solve practical, everyday legal problems. The title also reinforces learning throughout the discussion with the author panel. We were able to see that, there was a repetition or reinforcement of learning to the students. The lecture resources that are available in PowerPoint slides. This does make your job easier as a lecturer, as it does make it easier for you to be able to integrate that into your particular teaching style. It is available in print as well as ebook format. So whichever one you prefer, should you want to maybe also have it embedded on your LMS, then that is also a possibility. You would be able to speak to your key account manager and we'd be able to discuss your options further. The ePDF has active links and easy navigation. So it does make for easy navigation for both you and the students. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand over for the closing on to Janet.
Thanks very much, Michelle. And my presentation is doing strange things. Let me try and get back to, apologies, everyone. There we go. So just to highlight your key account managers that you can connect with if you would like to get hold of a desk copy and prescribe it for any of your courses. You've been introduced to Zimmy, who's looking after our Eastern, Western and Northern Cape, the Free State, Mpumalanga and the Northwest. And for anyone who is in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng and Limpopo, you can contact Michelle, and their details are on the screen. But their, their email addresses, if you would like to reach out to them, are their name and surname, name.surname@mml.co.za. And this concludes our webinar for today. We want to thank you for attending this Beyond the Words webinar for Law of Persons and the Family, Fresh Perspectives, 3rd edition. We really do value your time and hope that you've enjoyed the session. We particularly want to thank Amanda and Wissal for their engagement today. A copy of the recording and a certificate of attendance will be sent to you shortly, but please have a wonderful day, and we trust that you have enjoyed the time with us. Thanks very much. Goodbye.